Hello, and thanks for watching Inside Berkley. I'm your host, Caitlin Flora, and I'm joined today by our City Manager, Matt Baumgarten. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on the show.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. We're sitting down today, December 20th, 2023, to talk a little about our 2023 Comprehensive Financial Report that was just completed by an independent auditor. If you're interested in reading the full report or viewing the presentation that was shared with City Council, you can check it out on our website at www.berkleymich.org/audit. Can you explain a little more about this annual process?
Absolutely. So here's the audit document right here. We audit up through the end of our fiscal year, which is different than what people think of when they think about the new year. We're counting down the ball on 6/30, which is June 30th. Right. You'll hear us use that as a shorthand quite a bit. We say 6/30 this, 6/30 that. Shorthand for June 30th, which is the end of our actual fiscal year. So for us at City of Berkley, our New Year's Day fiscally is actually July 1. So we audit this process up to that last day of the fiscal year, and then we spend a couple of months preparing all of the city's financial documentation as of that important date. And then by this time of the year, December, November, we are presenting those findings, and they're actually due to the state 6 months after the end of that fiscal year. So for us, we owe the state this large document every year right around the end of the calendar year. So 12/30, 12/31. That's how we present it each year. So the numbers that you're seeing in here capture that period after the failure of the May millage, but prior to the fiscal year where those cuts that allowed us to come in within our revenues actually started to take place. So this fiscal year actually began on July 1 of 2022, which is why you'll see it referred to as the 22-23 fiscal year. So.
Thanks for going over that a little bit. So when we say that we present the findings, is that city staff that presents it, or who typically puts together those findings?
It's that independent auditor that you mentioned, yeah. And it's so crucial to have an independent auditor work on this because it's actually a requirement of that state law that the person coming in, reviewing these things, presenting it, compiling this important information is separate from the city itself because it allows more credence, more transparency, and more accountability when you have something that's not beholden to only telling good news. They need to very accurately reflect the full financial picture of a community. So that's not a Berkley rule, that's a state rule, and just generally accepted governmental accounting practices, which we call GAAP.
Great, thank you for that. So I'll switch gears a little bit, and I'd like to call out a specific portion of our financial picture. Our general fund helps to cover the operation and delivery of crucial community services like police, fire, parks, and public works, and the ideal reserve balance is to strive for 25 to 35%. Could you share what this means and why this is important?
So a good way to think of 25 to 35% is we take the amounts that we don't have attributed to anything else. So we're not saving for them in the future, we haven't prepaid any liabilities. This is truly monies that we have saved in what you and I would call at home a rainy day fund. And that 25 to 35% is how far into the fiscal year you can make it if you had no revenues. So in our case, 25% is about 3 months or 1/4 of the year. That's our policy. That's something that Berkley has set for itself as a target. We set a minimum for ourselves at 20%, and the Governmental Accounting Officers Association, GFOA, has set 16% as being sort of a crisis amount. So a lot of different tiers. Thankfully, we are above them all. We are currently sitting at 27%, which is within our target, low end of our target. But as you can imagine, for somebody who, for a community who has seen its millage rates fall as far as it has, we're very comfortable with the 27%. Especially for unassigned fund balance, which is, again, things that don't necessarily have a purpose right now, but protect us against unforeseen challenges.
And thank you for explaining that piece. So let's talk a little bit now about taxable value growth.
Sure.
So this year in the state of Michigan, there was taxable value growth at 7.7%. What exactly does that mean for Berkley, specifically our finances?
Sure. So we were not as fortunate as the state of Michigan to see growth at 7.7%. We saw about 5.3% in our community, which is good. But again, we'd love to see it higher. I say a good way of saying that would be, the city or the state saw an inflationary rate of about 7.7 as well. So it was pretty close to what it saw in its growth. We only saw 5.3. So say if I have a dollar bill last year, and this year I have $1.05, I'm thinking, great, I have growth. I'm happy about that. But hey, everything that you could buy last year for $1 now costs $1.07. We're still 2 cents behind, and that's actually how the law that finances, that municipalities finance themselves is designed, unfortunately, where it can only ever be at or just below that inflationary rate, which has really hampered us. So in order to fix that, periodically go to the voters. You say, voters, we think we've built a resume, and we want to be able to preserve the following services. Could you roll that millage rate up? And tried it in May, it didn't work. So now we're stuck in that forever being 2 cents, 2%, however you want to say it, behind.
Yeah, so what does that mean for Berkeley specifically when we're behind like that?
It means, we had to make cuts. And we saw that more in the fiscal year that followed the one captured here in the audit. But it's something I know we've all felt. We're recording this in December, so we're about 6 months into our current fiscal year, and that has been one that has seen service reductions. It has seen a number of things have to cut back, because even in this fiscal year that we have audited now, we used about $630,000 in our fund balance, as we talked about earlier. Yes. You want to keep that number up, and so you can't keep going to that well. It's a finite supply of revenues. Thankfully, it protects us against the unforeseen, but you want to make sure that that's always there. So the best thing to do for our municipality is to make sure that our expenditures match fully our revenues and that we're not using that percentage. So we can't keep using $630,000 year over year because it will be gone.
So we talked a little bit about the taxable value growth. So could we go a bit into the other half of that equation, which would be millages? Sure,
and equation's a good way of putting it. The way that the city sees revenue is we take a millage rate, we multiply it by a taxable value, and that's what yields our revenue. So that's very well put. So we saw our operational revenue in this fiscal year here. We did see it stagnate, I think is the best way of putting it. The millage rate that you pay each year as a Berkeley resident has traditionally gone down. It did so in the fiscal year that's being audited here now. So we've seen that by design, by statute, fall each and every year. Any year the city's taxable value growth goes above, and thankfully this is a high-end year, goes above the state rate of inflation, we see our rates roll back. So you actually pay less as a resident each year, specific to the city's portion of it. And for that reason, we see those, that's why we have these numbers drop. That's why we had asked the voters to roll that back up. So for those reasons, we do still feel like we fall behind, especially the point I was making earlier, the rate of inflation year over year. And anyone, as I know we had on the screen a little bit ago, you can see that demonstrated. You can watch that number fall. Except for the voter-approved millages in 12 and 18, that number has gone down, down, down each time.
Yes, and I mean, inflation doesn't just affect your grocery bill, it affects all aspects. So that's
correct.
Definitely important to talk about.
Yeah, we've seen large inflation rates in capital projects and construction projects as well. So probably, it hits those projects more than it hits you and I in the back pocket as well.
Well, thank you for joining me today to talk a little bit about Berkeley's 2023 Comprehensive Financial Report, Matt. Could you let people know where they can find that publicly available if they're interested in more information?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to being in my hand, we have a hard copy available at each of our city buildings. But if you don't want to make the trip up to any of those buildings, you can go to berkleymich.org/audit. I believe you'll see it on the screen right now, and download the full document, including the transmittal letters, the management discussion and analysis, which offers some great summaries of the highlights and the challenges, but also the hard numbers themselves. Everything that ends up going to the state is available to all of our residents at any point whenever they'd like.
Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
You've been watching Inside Berkeley with your host, Caitlin Flora, joined by special guest City Manager Matt Baumgarten. Be sure to check out www.berkleymich.org/audit for the full comprehensive financial report under the drop-down menu title 2023 Audit Documents, and we'll see you next time.